Hello everyone, welcome back to Fate Stay Night. This is going to be my little Fate wrap-up, where I talk about my general thoughts about it and what I think about the characters. They're totally not going to change at all. It's usually the time for calling my shots early, missing about 90% of them, and absolutely nailing the last 10% of them, and only taking credit for that 10%. It's also where I can lay down my establishment of what I'm expecting from the story, what I expect from the characters, all that good stuff. Because I don't like seeing someone like lying and say, oh, I've always hated that person, or like, oh, from the very beginning I said I hated him. This is my way of keeping myself honest and being more open, because I'm very comfortable in my opinions and stating how I feel about a certain character at this given time, no matter how quote-unquote someone doesn't like it or not. That being said, my opinions are always subject to change, no matter how much I say I'm not gonna change. I usually say that to over-exaggerate. My opinions change like the wind. But I had to pull up. Might as well pull up the status. That's what I wanted. So I can talk about some certain characters I want to talk about. First, let's start with the servants. Those are going to be the quickest ones to get through, rather than... No, I don't want to start with her. We'll start with Berserker. Easy said and done. I don't want to start with Masters because that's going to take a lot longer to unpack than just regular servants. Okay, I don't like the music there. Fuck it. We're getting peaceful music. So Berserker, Heracles, I should say, there's not much to really talk about him, because we didn't see much of him, and from what we do see, he's just a mindless monster, except when he was about to die. We get this really human approach from him when he's dying and talking about facing Saber and all of that. Like, it's really nice. It's a very interesting twist on Berserker doing that at the very end, considering how he was for the beginning. I like him. He's cool. I think makes a great secondary antagonist and a threat. It's a good way to unify a bunch of servants together and people together, because he is such a monster to take down that you have to work together to take him down. Well, I mean, I doubt Gilgamesh would, but everyone else, you can't just naturally take him down. He's so powerful. He acts as a nice unifier and really brings the characters together, and I think it's a really smart way of doing that, through having this insurmountable task ahead of them, like one of his tasks, and making them come together and find a way to beat him, depending on the cost, of course, the cost of Archer. Next servant, I would say, of knowing very little about / unimportant, I would say Assassin. We just didn't see enough of him. I don't know Japanese lore and stuff like that, so he doesn't really mean that much to me, I should say. So I'm not really 100% on him. I don't find him too interesting because I just don't know his backstory at all. And he just didn't stand out enough for me to be like really like, oh, I want to see more of him. I could be wrong, of course. I mean, I probably will. We probably will see more of him. I doubt it'll be in the next one. I'll predict in the third one we'll see more of him. That's my prediction going forward. Until then, there's not much to say about him, honestly. I have more to say about Berserker than him. Next, we move up to Caster. And I don't know who she is. I'll be honest. I have a feeling she's Greek. I think she's because she talked about, the time of gods and all that. I think she's Greek. Now, the amount of female Greeks, and I don't know what constitutes who can be a caster and who can't. So I'm not too sure. I can't really narrow it down much more than that I believe she is a Greek woman. Or at least in Greek mythology, I shouldn't say that. I don't know if her origin is literally Greece, but I think she's from the Greek mythology. Where, though, in it, she can have a huge range. I mean, there's no telling where she's from. She's definitely She has some tricks up her sleeve that I'd be very wary about. The whole knife that can control people. That's not something good. I don't want to run into that. Because it's... something like that is extremely bad, and I have a feeling it's going to come up at some point. Either it be the next one or the one after. I mean, there's only 3, so it has to be. I have a feeling that's going to come up at something major, and I think there's not going to be an option, but we will just lose Saber to it. Because there's no other reason of framing that as such a, like... because it's a really overpowered, like, knife, but it wasn't used a lot. So I have a feeling it's going to come up a lot later on. Like when people have forgotten about it. So I would say that's going to be late chapter, or arc 3, or route 3. I think that's going to come up very later in the story when you kind of forgot about that it's really important and really dangerous. So I'll pencil that in as major plot point going forward late. At least that's how I'm viewing that, because you kind of, after doing some mystery for a while, you kind of pick up on stuff like that. That the really major stuff usually gets dropped very quickly and very quietly. That knife was shown maybe 10 minutes, 20 minutes at most. And then Gilgamesh showed up and it's like, oh shit, he overshadowed everything about that. And so I think that's going to become very important later on. Next up, we have Lancer. A good old coup. I don't speak Irish, so I can't really pronounce Irish names that well, correctly at least. He's awesome. I want to see more of him. I hope next episode, or arc, route, whatever. I'm used to calling these episodes. Next episode we see him more. Because I can't get enough of him. He is so fucking cool. I mean, he's just... everything about him just oozes this sort of raw awesomeness to it. And it's just so interesting, and every time he's been on the screen, I've liked those scenes. Like, he's been in more, battle-oriented scenes, so of course you're going to enjoy those more. A tad bit more, generally speaking. But just in general, I mean, if it was just him talking with, say, Archer, those would be very enjoyable moments, because he's such an interesting character, and the way he interacts with the other characters is really unique as well. And given, like, just his tone of voice and how he addresses other masters and how he addresses other servants and the difference between those two, it's really interesting. Because he kind of has Saber's respect for the other servants, but he's not as, like, high class as she is when talking to other people. So he's more down to earth, but at the same time still shows a very high level of respect for his opponents and doesn't expect anything less of them. And I really respect that. I really enjoy that. Next we have Archer, the other Archer, red one. He's an awesome. Out of all the servants, he's probably my number 2 favorite, to be honest. He is such an interesting character with his whole worldview. It's very similar to how I'd view things, and I've already said this multiple times. So I relate really, really well to how he talks and how he views how he views Shirou's goals as almost pointless, and then it's foolish and naive to seek those things. What's the point of saving someone if you're throwing away your own life? All that those kinds of questions. It's very, very nice and refreshing to see him as a huge foil to Shirou. His identity, I have my thoughts. I just have to see him do more of his stuff. I mean, him pulling out 2 Chinese swords, it lends it to the idea that he's Chinese. I mean, so there's that. Other than that, I really don't have that much to go on. I mean, I can speculate here and there, but the problem is I don't know what time span the servants go from. Like, are they restricted to X amount of years in the past, X amount of years? Like, can you have someone from the future that could be a servant or something like that? That's questions I want answered, but I doubt it'll give it to me. I mean, let's be honest here. It wouldn't make sense. Thematically speaking, I could see how they could bring someone from the future in here. But logically speaking, it wouldn't make that much sense to bring someone from the future back into here, Unless, of course, the Grail Wars stop. But if he had knowledge of said Grail Wars that could bring him back into being part of the Grail War, I can logic it out and make it work. But I just don't, I'd rather not have to jump through some mental hoops there to get it there. That being said, I do have my doubts of, I do believe, it's hard to explain because it sounds like I'm talking out my ass. We saw him materialize swords. So, it looked like projection magic. I'm just gonna just straight out fucking say it. It looked like projection magic, which he was doing. Which is to say that, because it was very similar to how Shirou does it. Like, because I think it was 10 times? 15? It was 10 to 15, 7 to 15 times he was disarmed by Lancer. Then we also saw that he killed Berserker a bunch of times as well. And usually the only way you could do that is if you have a variety of weapons. Let's be honest here. So, and I doubt those two, puny twin blades aren't going to be cutting Berserker up. Let's be real here. You're going to need something a little bigger than that. And so I have my thoughts that he theoretically could be Shirou in the future. Because there's a lot of circumstances around it that's extremely similar, but at the same time not. Because we see him fundamentally disagree with Shirou's idea. The way he can understand it and why he would be able to disagree so fundamentally with it would be because if he's already believed that at one point, but space reality and seeing how that just cannot work in practical terms. And we see him reverse course on that kind of stuff. So it's very interesting to see if that develops any further, or maybe I'm just a fucking loon and looking for really obscure things because I've been trained and conditioned to look at very obscure things and just assume everything's a fucking conspiracy, right? I mean, that's the problem, I guess, at some point. Then I have to look at it and say, am I thinking too deep about something, or am I reading too much into a scene? Stuff like that. That being said, I don't want to be confirmed or denied on anything, regardless of how insignificant or important something is. If I say some character is going to piss me off, probably, or I'm never going to like this character, I don't want someone to say, oh, just give it time or something like that. I don't want that. I don't want confirmation or denial on any of the points above I've made or will make in the future. Because it's not fun. I like speculating, and I like being proven right or wrong via the game or a story. If the game doesn't prove me right or doesn't prove me wrong, at the end of it, then I can look into what some of my questions and see if it's answered in other media. If it is answered in some other visual novel, yeah, who knows? Maybe I'll do it in the future. Here's Up in the Sky. I don't know. It's good writing so far. Who knows? I mean, I'm not gonna say that I'm not gonna do any more. I'm not saying I will. So we'll look into the future. We'll have to see where this goes, of course. I'm loving it so far. The writing's really solid. I'm liking it so far. So, high probability, it's probably not the only Type Moon stuff I'll look into. Just laying it out there. Will I do it right after Fate Stay Night? Maybe. Depends. Anyways, like I was saying, I don't want to be confirmed or denied on anything. If it's revealed later in the story, don't fucking tell me. I don't care. Whatever excuse or reason you have, don't care. Is it something that's explained later? If the answer to that question is yes, leave it. I don't care if it's a clarification. I don't care if it's saying like, oh, this will not be answered. I'd rather go through the entire story and wait for it to not be answered than be told that it will not be answered. So I just want that to be clarified. Also, whenever I guess things or make predictions, I don't want help on predictions. I don't want any hints towards predictions. Because as I've stated before, I'd rather my whole stance on this idea is, if I am right, I'd rather be right on my own than be right with someone else's help. I'd rather be wrong on my own than be right with someone else's help. So I'm very prideful in that sense that I take responsibility and all rewards / consequences from guessing and being just myself. I will maintain that. I do not take other people's hints or anything else into consideration when I ever say something. So I just want that to be known. No matter what you guys say, spoiler or not, I will not listen to it regardless. If you tell me, oh, this character gets better, I don't care what you say. I'm sorry. I mean, I'll see for myself if that character gets better. I'll see if I get proven right or wrong. Don't tell me what I should think or what I will think. That's for me to decide, not you. But that's my personal goal. It's not to be rude or anything like that. It's just how it is. I'm just going to be honest with you. And I just want you guys to respect that I don't want that information until it's been provided to me by the source material, not secondhand from someone else. I just want that to be respected. And I mean, that's just how it is. If it's already been talked about and discussed, feel free. I am very willing to talk about other opinions. I really want to hear other people's opinions on things. I'd love that. But to start bringing up stuff I don't know about it, that's when I just have to say, no, that's got to stop. I'm pretty harsh when it comes to that stuff. I'll leave it at that. Next servant, Ryder. She's really interesting. I believe she is Medusa, given a lot of various circumstances that she's covering her eyes. Her noble phantasm's Pegasus, the Pegasus. I mean, all of these things, it lends itself to her being Medusa. If we get a scene with her taking off said blindfold and someone starts to feel, a little entranced by it, I'll know for a fact. Because part of her myth was being, decapitated, and then Pegasus ended up coming out. In the scene, in the hallway, she ends up cutting her neck open. So it can be speculated, and then her noble phantasm came out. I see where I'm going with that. It kind of starts lending itself to her myth and how that stuff came ahead. I mean, sure, slitting your throat's a lot different than being decapitated by someone, but it's still coming around the same way. The same idea. So I do believe she is Medusa, and I'm very much interested in getting to know her. I would love to see more of her in the second or third story. I don't care which. More of her is always a good thing. She's very interesting. I don't like the combination with her and Shinji. I feel bad for her. But any servant to Shinji, I want to get to know better away from Shinji, because I want to see how she reacts and how she talks about her master versus how an other servant would react to their master and how they'd talk to him. I want to know if she just absolutely despises him, or how she treats people around her, how she views life. I want to see all of these different things. I want to see her develop as a character. Either the second or third story, I don't care which. Whatever. Next up should talk about is Gilgamesh. I'll save Saber for last because this is her route. I'll talk with her about the Masters because she's enough of a main character to talk about as much. Gilgamesh, our main antagonist. Whoo boy, I love him so much. He's such an interesting character. He's so full of himself. He's so cocky, so arrogant. That's what I love about him. Like I said, when he first showed up, or not first showed up, when I was talking, I like two kinds of characters. I like the ones that are very humble about themselves, or I like the ones that are very self-confident about themselves. Either one. I don't like a meek person, but I don't like a braggart who can't back it up. He brags and backs it up. I know that because I know his legend. I don't need him to even show anything. Him bragging about everything and just knowing his backstory, he can talk all the shit he wants. He wrestled the motherfucking bull of heaven. I don't see anyone else doing that. So, he's definitely a character I want more of. If there was just a whole episode of him for 8 hours straight, I would be enraptured by it the whole 8 hours. He is such an interesting character. He's so different from how all the other servants are, because you see them be more subservient to their masters, more, you know, they bend the knee a lot more. He's just no holds bar, fuck off, I do what I want, I take what I want, this is my world, you're living in it. That whole attitude, that mentality is so amazing, so different from how every other servant is, how every other servant reacts. It's just so awesome. I love to root for the other side. I love to root for the enemy. I love to root for the underdog. I love to root for the favorite to win. I do all of those things. I love to root for both sides, technically. So we have the good guys, quote unquote good guys. I love seeing them win. You know, that's good. We are part of the good guys. That's just how the stories are usually framed. But then you also have the evil guys. I want to know their intentions. I want to know their reasons. I want to know their backstory, because I want to empathize with them and see their side of the story and see why they want to win. Without a good antagonist, a story is a failure. There are very few things I very harshly look at for a story to judge if it's good or not. Human characters. I want human characters. That's the number one priority. I don't give a fuck about the plot. I don't give a fuck about the music. I don't give a fuck about the art. None of that. Human characters and human responses. That's the number one thing I look for. In those human characters, I want to clearly defined roles of... Actually, I don't even want clearly defined roles. I want clear motives from everyone involved. I don't want these very vague and abstract ideas of, you know, I want to do good or something like that. Those aren't good motives. Shirou's motives are very clear and defined, that how he wants to be a superhero. And he explicitly talks about how he wants to. That's very good writing, in my opinion. How he wants to. His ideas are stupid. His ideals are pointless to follow, and I'll talk about this more in depth. But it's very good writing for his character. It's very idealistic because he's a very idealistic person, and it makes a lot of sense, I should say. So those are the first two things I really look at. And then, you know, the story, if it, you know, makes sense, if it flows from point A to point Z very, very smoothly, we're good. Not even very, very smoothly, just it doesn't make sense to get to point A to point Z. Yeah, okay, we're good. Sign off on it. Those are the three things I really just look for. Other than, at that point, everything else is just icing on the cake. If you can't get the cake right, everything else sucks. I don't care how good the music is. I don't care how good the art is. If those two things are atrocious, but everything else is great, it's whatever. Like, yeah, it's not good to look at or listen to. I can turn on some other music. I don't have to really look at it or pay much attention to the art. If I can't pay attention to a story, if I don't like a story, I'm not going to enjoy it, no matter how good the music is, no matter how good the art is. If the story is bad or the characters are bad, I'm not interested. That's just how it is. These characters are really interesting to me. I don't care anything about, like, the music is really good as a, you know, like an extra. The visuals, they're good as an extra. The CGs are nice. They're well drawn. I mean, they could be a little bit better at some points because minor art gripes aside, some parts are just a little bit sketchy, but they're really good at other times as well, because once you get to the CG part, that's when, you know, the best art comes out. The pre-scene at the very end that I'm thinking about, with the Holy Grail opening the sky, the black sludge dripping out, that was a great scene. It sent the scene it was just beautifully done. I love that art. That was amazing. Probably my favorite looking scene in the entire thing, because of just how visceral it was to actually see everything going on there. I'll say that was probably the most aesthetically pleasing scene that we had so far. I'm looking forward to see other ones. Now that I've talked about all the servants, I should talk into the masters and other main characters. Wow, there's a lot of characters. There's a lot of fucking characters. I wish there was a character screen for just the main characters. I would love that. Sadly, there's not. Actually, I think I can go into configure and look through the voices. That's a little too much work for me. If I don't talk about a character, just assume, I'm indifferent on them. That's the neutral way to just interpret that. But let's talk about Saber, who straddles the line between servant, love interest, and main character. Saber, or Arthuria, is a very I say that a lot, I shouldn't say that. I should explain more of what I mean. She's a complex character in the sense that she occupies so many roles at the same time while being quite defined, while also ambiguous at the same time. Her being this ultimate servant while also at the same time not being a complete servant is really interesting in the fact that we're told constantly how she's, Shirou's a bad master through most of the story, and how it's his fault that, she's not as strong as she could be. And then when it's revealed that, hey, it's actually not Shirou's fault, it's actually your fault. It's interesting how they kind of just drop the whole fact, and it's more of just an awe of how amazing she is, that even while not at full strength, she's that powerful. So it's a real testament to her as a character that she's that strong. Kind of shitting on Shirou for getting shit on by everyone else saying how terrible you are. But that's, I guess, what's not really important right now. What's important, I guess, is her ideals and how she wants to do everything for her country. It's really noble, and I really respect that. I might not like Saber on a romantic level, or I'm just not really interested in her archetype and how she feels about things, but her undying loyalty to her country and her oath is really admirable, and I really respect that of her. And for me as a master, I would look at her as a servant and be very, very proud to be her master. If she has that much loyalty to her country and to her people and all of that stuff, it's very, very special to me, because I like seeing loyalty in a character and their devotion to something else, something greater than what they are. Because she talks about how she's not a human, and she is the king. All human emotions come up, later. That in itself is actually really human for her to do, because you don't see many other people or many other ideas and concepts. They don't forsake their own humanity to go beyond themselves, to do something greater than what they are. It's a very human ideal that we strive for, to become less human in a sense, to be better. And I've always found that concept to be very interesting, because a lot of people might say, or at least I could see people arguing, how Saber's not a human character, how she's, one note, she doesn't experience emotions on a very complex level, she doesn't change that much, except we do see her change in her own ways and how she views things and how she reacts to Shirou and all that stuff through this love relationship. But that's not how I view her as human. I view her human on more of a basic level of her undying devotion to her country and to her people is what makes her intrinsically human. That she's willing to forgo her own happiness for something else, someone else, some other people. And you don't see that in non-human characters or very one-note bland characters. That in itself is what makes her a very good character, in my eyes. Because it's not about how outwardly emotional a character is or how they do certain things. Her being so devoted is what makes her a good character. In my eyes, that is. Her refusing to be selfish, her refusing to take or allow any emotions to seep out, all of those things culminate into a very deep character, in the sense that she's never going to find happiness in herself, because she isn't going to allow herself to be happy, because she feels that it would be taking away from her people and her country. It's a very noble thing to do, but also at the same time very stupid and naive, because you can't rule a country like that. You cannot completely remove your humanity to rule a country, and this is where Saber's big flaw comes in, which is also what makes her human. Her ideals of this flawless king is what leads to her downfall. People don't want to see someone flawless. They want to see someone with mistakes. People get very nervous and upset around people that are flawless, people that are perfect or appear to be perfect, because it's just a very natural thing to do, that humans want to nitpick and look for people's faults. You look through all throughout history. people have constantly tried to tear people down because we feed off that. We like that idea. Because when someone has too much of something or too perfect in something, we don't like it because it only enforces the ideas that we ourselves aren't perfect. I'll be the first to admit, I have my huge glaring faults. I can list off the top 10 right now, but that's not the point. I can see why people wouldn't like Saber in her time, also in this time, saying stuff like, say, she's too cold, she's too unresponsive, all that stuff. I've said she's pretty cold, but that's coming from a romantic sense. As a leader, I'd want that. I like her as a leader to a degree. I want her to have human emotions, though. If I'm going to be honest, if I want a ruler, I want them to have human emotions. I want them to act emotionally at times. Because if they're just stone-faced all the time, you don't know what's going to happen. Like, you don't know how they're going to react to something. Like, oh, 1,000 people just died. Huh. What are you going to do? Statistics, right? And, it's the same reaction as, oh, we just, invented the wheel or something. Okay, that's, next invention. What's next? It's the same kind of emotional reaction that they'd have with her being so judgmental, or not judgmental, but so cold-hearted and closed off. That this is why the people didn't like her. They wanted to see something. They wanted to see a fault. They wanted to see a crack, something in the facade. And this is how I'm reading her character. This could change over time. This is just how I want to re-emphasize. This is how I'm reading her character right now. And why I really like Saber as a character right now. They wanted to see her fall, and this is what ended up driving the Civil War. Kind of. I mean, I'm also ignoring a lot of other factors that led to it, but I'm just giving one cause to it. And she couldn't really deal with that fact, and that's why she wanted to go into the past and change, because she viewed it as herself that was the failure, and not reeling into it was her mindset and her ideology that was the failure. It wasn't her herself, it was just her mindset going into it, and it's something you can't really tell her about because she wouldn't understand it. It's kind of like Shirou. It's his ideology. It's not him himself, it's just his ideas that are the problem. Now that diatribe with Saber is over, I'll talk about her more probably in regards to Shirou when I get to him. I'll probably get to him last. Next to last. Sakura. I don't really like her. I don't like her archetype. The meek, really submissive kind of girl is just really unappealing to me on it. Just a natural level. I don't like the whole younger girl act, and I shouldn't say act. She is technically younger than him. I don't like it. It's just not appealing to me because I feel like I'm a really harsh person. I'm really brash. I'm really loud. I'm abrasive as hell. Why anyone watches me, I don't know. But I'm very vocal about what I like, what I dislike. And I don't mesh well with those kinds of people because I feel like I'm talking down to them. I'm talking over them because, I'm going like 1,000 miles an hour. If you're not going to keep up, I'm just going to blow past you and just keep going. I can take my breaks and shit like that, but I'm loud. I'm obnoxious. And it just wouldn't mesh well with Sakura. So just those whole themes and character types, I just don't like. Whenever a girl displays that very much in a media, especially in Japanese media, because usually they overplay those archetypes, and I can see the appeal of them, I can. It's just not for me. I want someone that's going to call me out on my bullshit. I want someone that can meet my competition head on. I'm a very fiercely competitive person, down to my core. I make everything a competition, no matter what. I make everything a debate, an argument, everything, and I win every single argument and debate I have. I never lose one. Never have lost one, because I will keep arguing until the other person gives up. And I can't have that with Sakura. If I start yelling at her, I'll feel like I'm basically verbally abusing her, because I'll talk too harshly to her and she'll probably start crying, and then I'll feel bad. It'll just be a very bad relationship cycle. Shirou would be great with her because he's not a really confrontational person. He's pretty tame when it comes to that stuff. There are a lot of words I could use to describe him that I shouldn't, but he's very laid back in what we've seen. He's not a go-getting type of person. He talks about how he wants to do all of these things, but he doesn't ever go out and actually do those things. More on Shirou later. These are the teases, because that's gonna be an hour talk about him. Woof. Fuji, she's a good comedic relief character. There's not much else to say about her. I don't find her personally attractive to me. I don't like those styles. As much as I like an assertive person and, you know, someone that will call me out on my bullshit, at the same time I do want someone that's... I want a mix. I want a little bit of Sakura, a little bit of Fuji. I want some competitiveness, but I don't want it at 100% because then it feels like I'm just constantly fighting and it'll just get annoying after a while, because I do like taking some breaks at times because I can be pretty lazy. So I need someone to kick my ass at some point. But at the same time, I don't want someone to be so far... I don't want too much. It's all about balancing. Next, we got the king asshole Shinji. Shinji, I want to kill you so fucking bad. Oh, and props to Ilya. You know what? Round of a fucking applause for killing him. You know what? Can't take it away from her. She did good. She's not an evil person completely. She is willing to take the bullet and smash the bug that he is. There's not much to say. He's a fucking scumbag. If anyone honestly supports him, fuck off. I would love to know your reasonings at the end of this, because unless he makes a major change in the third episode, because I doubt he'll make a change in the second one. If he makes a big change in the third one, I'll gladly take all this back, but he's a fucking son of a bitch. He abuses his little sister. Fuck off. There's no reason to do it. It's just, go to fucking hell. If I was Shirou, I'd kick his ass every day. I see Sakura has bruises, I'm breaking his fucking arm. Because you just don't do that. If you're a quote-unquote friend, you don't let your friend beat his little sister. Any guy will tell you that. Any guy will tell you that. You do not touch, or you don't let someone touch their little sister. That is just off limits. It's fuck to do. And he honestly needs to get absolutely bent over and fucked. I mean, Shirou, grab an iron pipe, break his arms and hands, and bust his kneecaps if he touches his little sister. It's something you don't do because there's no need. There's no justification. Never. Nothing. I don't care if Sakura is said to have killed 20 people. You don't beat her. You don't beat your little sister. Fuck off. Fuck off. Get right the hell on out of here. Kotomine! Antagonist. The priest. I like him. He's funny. He's overly everything, and he's a very interesting person, and just how he's just... I don't want to say over the top in the sense that how I usually mean over the top. I mean just so loud and so blunt about what he says, and it's just amazing how he can take a topic and talk about it the way he does, and how he views other people and suffering. It's just so unique and so interesting. The fake priest. He's just he's a good antagonist. I wouldn't want anyone else in the story I wouldn't want. He's very suited for that role. Quick minor character. I'd love to see Shirou's dad. I want to get to know him more. Kiritsugu, I'd love to get like a couple solid hours just about him. I want to get to know him better because he's frankly interesting. Shirou gets a lot of his stuff from him. I want to see how he viewed the world at first, because he didn't seem to be as Shirou is. He wasn't as I need to be a superhero. He was much more normal about it, I should say. I would love to see him in the story. Next, I should probably talk about Ilya as well, the little girl. Phew. I don't know what to fucking say about her. She's terrifying, but good at the same time. She's cute-ish. I mean, if you're into that kind of thing, I prefer my girls to be legal age. But she's just all over the place. She acts like a very sweet little kid at times, but you know, the next beat she's, you know, threatening to torture you. So her 180s are crazy. But she really gives off a girl that just wants to have a family. Like, you know, because she clearly doesn't have a father or mother around. Like I said, I'd love to get to know her mother. Because I bet she was interesting. I mean, Ilya has to get it from somewhere. I think she seems to be extremely lonely as a person, and why she's as depraved as she is, because she hasn't had human contact. That she's just been this isolated young girl in this castle for presumably her whole life, mostly her whole life. I'm not sure. And you know, her whole existence is to be the Holy Grail and stuff. It's really tragic, honestly, to see her have to burden that, and which is why, you know, she fights so hard in the Grail Wars she does. I kind of feel shitty now that I wanted to send her to the church, I'm gonna be honest. That was a bad call for me. If I knew she was the Holy Grail, and if I knew Kotomine was doing that shit, I never would have and on earth suggested that she goes there. Oh, that would be awful, 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 awful thing to do. And looking back on it, I see that now. I see that error. And I mean, there's going to be a lot of those things to come, because it's just how it is. I don't know these characters. I don't know what they're doing. I see Kotomine. Hey, he's a priest. He's at the church. She's crazy. I don't want to fucking deal with her. He's crazy. I don't want to put a child through what he's already done to other children. So that's just how my thinking and evolution is going to change over the next few stories, because it's just how it always is. So sorry if I ever say something that is a little bit harsh about a character. Understand, I don't know as much as you probably do. So give me some time. I'm gonna realize my own mistakes and my own blunders. So just laugh with me, because that's just what I'm gonna do. I laugh it off and say, God, I was fucking stupid back then. That's just how I'm gonna act, and I'm sorry if I say some shitty things about characters that end up being good. I mean, I probably said shit about Shirou a bunch of times, but I'm gonna give credit where credit's due on all of the characters, regardless of if I like them or not. I will keep that at 100%, and I always will. Next, let's talk about our main character, the big one, Shirou Emiya. Superhero in training himself. I don't know where to begin. I think the best place to start off is, I feel awful for what he had to go through in his life. It is something no child should ever have to go through. Having to lose your family in a fire, being a survivor, and he's a very human character. I want to state that as well. Very human. The most human character out of everyone, through his suffering and what he's had to go through. And he isn't the last character, actually. Forgot that. He's the most human character, probably, that we've seen so far. And I'll explain why I believe this so. Because I have a feeling some people also argue the same with Saber, that he's just one note, and that's it. It's a really shallow reading of Shirou, just from this first episode alone, if someone's taking that away. And I'll prove them wrong. So we see him, it opens, or I shouldn't say opens, but his backstory is based around the fact that he is a survivor of this horrible fire. He's lost his parents, he's lost his family, everyone he knows dead, burning, suffering, everything. Is awful, awful thing, and I would never wish this upon any child, no matter who they are. It is a fate crueler than death, which fuels his idea that he shouldn't be alive. His survivor's guilt is what drives his hero complex in a very negative way. and he adopts this idea of being a superhero from Kiritsugu, who saved Shirou. That's an extremely important thing to know. But at the same time, it's a very dangerous idea he has in his head, this idea of saving someone at the expense of my own life. This process is very toxic to him as a person. It's extremely dangerous. And at the point where a lot of people would probably write him off as saying he's one note, stupid, and he has a hero complex. This is where people would it's a very high probability someone could overlook this and say, oh, he's just one note, this is all it is. They don't look at that. His survivor's guilt is what is driving this idea narrative that he doesn't matter, that he doesn't need to live, that he can sacrifice himself. Because we see constantly him, or in his quote, people die when they're killed. Him constantly living through all of these situations reinforces this idea of him wanting to, or I shouldn't say wanting to, but putting himself in positions where any normal person would die. Him throwing away his life and not dying. It's almost a really cruel fate that, fate, pun intended, that no matter his best attempts, whether intentional or not, to get himself killed ends in him living. That no matter how hard he tries to kill himself, to be a hero, it always fails utterly. In the first scene with Berserker, he throws himself in front of Saber, gets destroyed from in his stomach. Any normal human dies, ends up living. The wounds against Ryder that was inflicted upon him, any normal human dies from those wounds. Though that isn't necessary. Actually, no, it is him being a hero because he's trying to stop Shinji and saving everyone in the class. He's trying to be a hero there. I want to establish all of these events as trying to be a hero. The fight against Lancer. Technically, he's not being a hero at that point. He's not saving anyone, which is why I've omitted it. Then we move on to Gilgamesh. I'm probably skipping a couple. No, actually, no. We see him throw himself in front of the blade in front of Saber. Again, being a hero, not dying from it. Probably a human would end up dying from a blade in the back. Especially that kind of dagger. It's going to leave some nasty wounds, and it was really fucking with his mind. A normal human probably dies from that wound, to be honest. Gilgamesh, when he gets absolutely hammered, he ends up living after standing out twice. After standing up against him for the first time, gets destroyed with a hammer. Most people just die instantly there, or they're on their door. He then gets up and tries to protect Saber one last time, and he should have died there as well, with getting his arm slashed off almost. And then, of course, the very final scene with Kotomine, him trying to save the world in a sense. Most people die in there by saying, the end of the world and all that. But at that point, we already see him as a different character. Going into the basement, basically getting yourself killed. But we see him at that point already change his mindset into living, which is why he projected Avalon to save himself. He wasn't willing to die at that point because he already earlier admitted to the point where, yeah, that's just wrong thinking. I can't think that way. Once he started that kind of thinking, he stopped throwing himself needlessly into danger. Oh, fight against Berserker. He threw himself into that fight as well. The round 2 fight, when he brought out Excalibur. That was more about a necessity at the same time, but it was still trying to be a hero and save Saber, even knowing he can't do anything. Or at least believing he can't do anything. All these times he throws himself, he's saved by the power of Avalon. And it's a very cruel fate that the man who wants nothing more than just die for someone else and to be a hero cannot be allowed to do that. That it's really ironic. And I don't know if it has to be intentional. Then it has to be set up that way. I'm reading it into that way because it's just too blatant not to read into that way. Because it's already established how he has survivor's guilt, that why was he the one to live? That's classic survivor's guilt 101, and it's immensely believable to assume. In fact, it's foolish to assume not that he doesn't have survivor's guilt from said big fire. So we move on from him. His hero complex is extremely human in nature. After living through that kind of scenario, he has this desire to die, but at the same time save someone in the process, because he doesn't view himself as worthy of living compared to other people who are suffering. And it's a very human ideal to want to save someone, even at the expense of your own life, and have survivor's guilt because you were saved. His relationship with Saber is really interesting because they have very similar ideals in how to protect people and how to save people, and putting themselves last in order of importance. And both are quite flawed in that respect, because you can't put someone else first over yourself and put yourself last. Because once you do that, you lose your reasoning abilities to judge situations and to understand that, hey, maybe I shouldn't die here. That dying here is going to lead to no gain, no positive outcome. And that's why Shirou ends up changing and realizing that fact. And I say that, but I mean, he just had that moment of recognition where he can't put himself last. That those ideals are going to get you killed, but it's not going to solve any problems. Humanity's still going to have people that die and suffer. You can't save everyone. You can save the greatest amount of people, but dying in the process isn't going to solve anything. And that's why Shirou is so ultimately stupid, because he can't see past that. He can't see past his own failures as a person, and his own failures of his ideology and worldview, that he just can't comprehend the fact that human nature is flawed in and of itself, and that dying to save someone isn't going to result in everyone being happy. It might result in one person being happy, maybe 100, but at the end of the day, it's a minuscule amount compared to the amount of suffering endured on the world on a global scale on a day-to-day basis, let alone a year. And Shirou, even though he talks his big game, he's very much not proactive in trying to be a hero. You don't see him volunteering at, various places where he could help homeless people, or volunteer at a local fire station, if they have volunteer workers at a fire station in Japan. I'm not sure. I don't know about their city. Regardless, he could get training in CPR. He could become a paramedic. Like that path would be perfect for him, but he's not seeking it. Because at the core root of it, he doesn't want to be a hero. He doesn't want to die. He's very selfish, but he's not willing to admit that he's human in that regard. He doesn't want to accept the fact that, hey, I don't want to die. I don't want to suffer for someone else. I want to help people, but I don't want to die. We see him try to, but at the same time he doesn't want to, because we see him paralyzed up in fear in some moments. We see him not going out of his way to do all the things that he could as well. There's plenty of times where he could have saved other people or done more to help other people, but he hasn't. Him in his daily life, he's working, he's, doing jobs and stuff like that. That's not helping anyone. That's not saving anyone. Why don't you go volunteer to, soup kitchen or something like that? He doesn't, because that's not the end goal. He's not really trying to be a hero. It's what he thinks he wants to be, which is a very interesting thing. And all these things I'm talking about, Shirou, I disagree fundamentally with his worldview. It doesn't mean I don't like him as a character. I love him as a character. He's a very interesting, unique, the foundation on his character is very well done. And he's grounded in a very normal and humanistic way, rather than someone who has like a hero complex but it doesn't have reason to be a hero. He has a very understandable reason to be a hero, and it's a very noble goal, but at the same time, he's not willing to actually go out of his way to get it done and achieve that goal, which is his fundamental flaw as a person, which is very good. I like people with flawed. I like flawed characters. It's what makes them real. It's what makes them likable and enjoyable. Going on to Reen, best girl, and I swear to Christ, if she dies, I'll be absolutely heartbroken and devastated. She's a very unique character. I love her two-sidedness. It's a very appealing trait that she has. Her competitive attitude is what I really enjoy. She's the perfect, I don't want to say perfect example, she is a very good example of what I find very attractive in a woman. She's very confident in herself, and she carries herself in a very high regard, but at the same time, she also knows when not to be. It's a very fine balance, and I think she finds that stride perfectly for what I enjoy. Her two-faced nature at school versus how she is normally is very relatable. I am very much the same. I put on this cold mask. I'm emotionless. I'm dead on the inside. I'm very cold, unapproachable in real life. If you see me, I will look like I'm pissed off at something, because that's just how I normally am. I just put on a face. I don't want to talk to someone I don't want to talk to. It's a bunch of annoying bullshit I have to deal with. Fuck off. I'm just here to do my job. Leave me alone. It's that kind of ideal, which is the same approach Tohsaka took. But at the same time, as much as I'm like that, I'm very receptive to how people interpret how I look and how I interact with people. I can approach people very easily and work on them in that sense. I can be very manipulative at times when trying to persuade people to my side or try to get closer to people. It's very easy for me to empathize with others and put myself in their shoes and make them feel more comfortable talking to me. I have a natural gift at doing that in person. One-on-one conversations, I'm very open and very honest with how I feel, with good and bad things on me. So I think that's what opens people up. The more honest I am, the more people open up, and that's how I can draw people in, while not necessarily being technically honest and open completely. I feel like Tohsaka is the same way, because she talked about how she doesn't want to get too close to people because they'll see the real her. I can relate to that very similarly. I don't want people to be ultra close to me because I don't like getting severe attachments to people. It sucks. I'm very jaded in that sense. I'm very closed off and reserved from other people. It takes a long time for me to really be open and honest with people that in person. On the internet, fuck it. I just talk about whatever shit I want to talk about, and I'm pretty honest and open about it and how I view things, because I have that veil of anonymity. Fuck off. I can't English. I have that. I don't have to. I have a physical and metaphorical mask on in that sense, that I don't have to have a face with the name, right? Or with the ideas. It would be much different if I was in public talking about these things. I wouldn't be talking about the things I do. I'd be very much more closed off and more reserved with how I talk and how I approach topics. I wouldn't be as brazen, because I don't want to cut opportunities off. I'm very observant. I look at opportunities that way, and Tohsaka is very much the same way. She's very observant, but at the same time not, which is her flaw, because she's overly prideful, and I like that. I like someone that's I'd rather someone who's overly prideful than not prideful at all, because I can work with that, because I can at times be really prideful, but I know when to cool it off and when to stop. It's all about the balance, and I'm really good at that, and I feel like I understand how Tohsaka can get ahead of herself, and that's a very easy for me to deal with. That flaw, perfect for me to deal with. If she makes one big mistake, I can fix those mistakes. That's easy. That her flaws are very easy for me to deal with. Her personality works really well with mine, while Saber's doesn't, and Sakura's doesn't. They just are incompatible in that sense. Tohsaka and I, perfect. Because think of it how she reacts with Archer. They get along really well. That's basically how I would talk with her. I'm very sarcastic in person. I'm very confident, and I carry myself with a lot of pride because I respect myself enough to do that. I don't take, lesser things for granted, or I don't count people out. I always treat people with that sense of, you know what, if they're in a competition, they're meant to be here. I'm not going to look down on them and think they're nothing. So I'm going to go out on my own, but I'm still going to win, because that's just me. I don't lose. That's how I'd approach this situation, and why I really think I would merge well with Tohsaka. And that's why I really like her character, and she's very human in that regards too, because she has flaws. She isn't as Miss Perfect as everyone says she is. She puts on that exterior, and once that mask comes off, and once she reveals how she really is, and how she's, egotistical, prideful, full of herself, we see that personality come through, and how she changes, and how she's the same girl, but it's just a little bit different. That she just tones herself down a little bit in public, it's what makes her human, and what makes her complex and interesting, and I want to see more of her. Her route next, that is going to be my favorite route. I can already guarantee it. That is going to be my favorite. I think we will get such the Rin development that I will be head over heels for. It's going to be amazing. There's not one thing that could fuck it up, except one person, Shirou. If he absolutely shits the bed with her, I'll be pissed every minute. That's going to be the episode or chapter where it's a make or break for Shirou for me. He's either going to piss me off so much that I'm going to be eternally pissed off at him, or he's going to make me proud and I'm going to call him my boy. Either one is going to happen. I'm really worried about the first one happening. My predictions for what's going to happen in Rin's are out. Well, I think we'll get to know Archer a bit more. I'd imagine a little bit more information on Gilgamesh, because he was introduced late. I wouldn't be surprised if we got a little more information earlier on than when he was introduced in this chapter. Saber will probably take a backseat, because we've already gotten all of her story. Going into her more would almost weaken her character a little bit more, because it would be like beating the dead horse. We've already seen her change. Seeing her change more in this next episode would be good. That being said, I don't want to go into her backstory again. I don't want to go into her motives, because we've already got that. Unless they've changed, I don't want to get into that. Any scenes that repeat, because I don't know how many days are the same or whatever. Any repeated scenes, I'm just going to go ahead and probably skip over. If there are a few line differences in like certain scenes, I don't care that much. If 4 lines are different out of like, a 50 line thing, I'd rather skip and get to the new stuff than rehash 46 previous stuff and remember or get to know like 4 new stuff. It depends how important the new stuff is. If it's something plot changing, I'll just deal with it. If it's not, it can wait. Ilya, I don't think we'll get more information on her. I think that would be Route 3. I'll say that. I think we'll get a lot of Ilya information on Route 3. Shinji, I have a feeling we'll get to know him a little bit better. Same with Ryder in the next arc. So the servants I think it'll focus on would be Ryder, Archer, and characters in general. Shirou, Shinji, and Ren, obviously. The third chapter will probably go over Caster, Assassin, Maybe Berserker a little bit. Maybe. Don't see much. Oh, Lancer. Lancer in the second episode. I think we'll get to see Lancer in there. Because he's so fucking cool, he has to show up. Though I could see them putting off the one of the better servants until the end. Gotta keep everyone entertained, right? And, anyways, I think I should start wrapping it up. I've been going on long enough. Oh, God, my throat's killing me as well because non-stop talking for an hour. Oh, Jesus. It's so good. The writing's really, really good. The story itself is entertaining. Overall, Fate was very, very good. As much as people say, oh, this is the weakest. How good is the fucking other two? If this is the weakest. Because it was a very good opening. It had great foundations. It established the world very, very well. The characters were introduced in a very nice way, with enough interest to keep a reader to keep going. It never overplayed its hand or overstayed its welcome. The pacing was fine in my eyes. Because, in all of the stories I've done, everyone says, oh, the beginnings always are slow. Their beginnings are slow. I like slow beginnings. It's what I like the idea of, boiling the frog. You put it into cold water and then slowly boil it. That's just how I like it, or the lobster, whatever. Whichever one that you do, you bring it to a boil. I like that. I want to get my feet wet first before I jump in. I want the slow burn. I don't want to jump straight into the action because slow down. I want to know these characters. I want to know their motivations. I don't want to see someone get killed in 2 minutes. That's not entertaining for me. So slow burns are always going to be more liked in my eyes than not. Not to say that fast starting stories are bad. I just think it's inherently better to set up your world first. Start the nice cake and then build upon it. Because once you start blowing your loads on early stuff with, fight scenes early, you're just putting it, icing onto a blank slate on the fucking table. There's no substance there. It doesn't mean anything to me. I want well-developed characters before we get into a fight. Rin was already established before she fought. And it made it interesting, because we followed her around for a couple days with Archer before she started fighting. It was good. And that was even the prequel. Or prologue, I should say. And then we followed Shirou for a while until he gets stabbed, because we get to see his character start building. All these things are very interesting, and it makes the fight more compelling and more entertaining to have characters that we know and understand fighting. It's what made the final battle so interesting and so good. Because without a good character, or a good start, it'd be pointless. Anyways, I think that's enough for today. Or at least I'm rambling for the day. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, please like the video and subscribe for more videos. Unlimited Blade Work starts tomorrow. That's going to be interesting. I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, has a little Rin as the thumbnail for the EXE. I'm going to like that. That's a good sign. So, I'm really looking forward to it. They say Fate's the worst. I'm looking forward to seeing how great the other two are, if this is the worst. Bring it the fuck on. Make sure to comment down what your opinions are, if you agree or disagree. Thank you guys so much for watching the video, and see you guys tomorrow.